he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
What's going on, guys? It's Mario Man Tells 100 backing up another episode of How's My Team. If I sound a little bit nasally, I apologise. I am sick right now. I have a runny nose and that, so I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible, obviously, to try and get more rest, get more, just to get better. But ultimately, got to make an episode, considering that one of the episodes I've made previously is me with like half a voice. So I feel like I need to do this. I said that I was going to do one, so we'll get right into it. Obviously, the Titans had a double header. Obviously, the women played first. They played against the Eels. Then, obviously, the men played against Manly. We had the Giants, obviously, yesterday as well, play against Essendon. We had the Cubs, obviously, against the Twins, Minnesota Twins, I should say, after the All-Star break. And I'll mention a little bit on the All-Star game as well with that. But yeah, lots to talk about. Obviously, the World Cup final just played this morning when I'm recording this. The third place game played yesterday, and obviously the semi-finals as well, considering I think I covered maybe one of them, but not both of them, I'm not sure. But we'll go over all those results anyway, and there's lots to talk about, obviously, in terms of that. But yeah, been quite busy, and let's get started with the episode. Alright, we're going to start with the Titans women's team, because obviously that actually was the first game, apart from obviously the World Cup and obviously some of the games for the Cubs. The women's Titans game was technically the first one for my team, for my teams over the weekend, and all of them played yesterday. Time of recording this portion anyway was on Sunday, so this was a Sunday morning into the early afternoon. Titans against the Parramatta Eels. Sorry, I've got a eucalyptus lolly in my mouth, obviously, as you could probably even see on my face, so you can tell that I'm sick, especially around my nose. My nose is obviously red from blowing my nose a lot, but I'm going to try and push through, as we usually do, but big result for the Titans women, 50 points to 12. It was the highest margin and the highest score that the Titans women's team has ever put on the field for the NRLW, and it's another 50 burger against Parramatta for the Titans, including obviously earlier this season, obviously the Titans going down to Parramatta to beat Parramatta earlier in the in the men's competition, one of our only wins and one of the biggest wins of the club. So yeah, great result. Obviously started the day really strong, despite me obviously feeling very sick with a cold. Still like kind of stuffy in my head as well, but 50 points to 12, nothing to scoff at. Watched most of this game, and it was fantastic to see the Titans really get up and really put on a result. And we'll mention on why later on, but scored in the second minute from Lily Paxton, and I believe most of these were converted. In fact, actually, Lauren Brown was hit and miss when it comes to conversions. She converted 5 conversions out of 10, so 10 tries to 2 in the game. She converted on the Lily Paxton one. Indy Bostock scored in the 5th minute. Ivania Osako scored in the 10th minute. Indy Bostock scored again in the 13th minute. Georgia Gray ended up scoring in the 17th minute. Lily Paxton scored a double in the 25th minute. And then Lily Colk ended up scoring in the 34th minute for Lauren Brown to kick the conversion for that one on the 35th minute. So at half time, and just before that, Elsie Albert ended up going over in the 32nd minute and was converted by Rachel Pearson. So it ended up being 32 points to 6 at halftime. So great first half. And the possession was more in the Eels' favour in the second half. The Eels really stepped up their defence in the second half, only giving away a couple of tries, but obviously the result speaks for itself. The game was pretty much over at halftime. Elsie Albert ended up scoring first in the second half, scored the 43rd minute, which brought one try back with the conversion as well. But Phoenix ran Hippai, ended up scoring the 61st minute, and that was converted. Dakota Thompson went over in the 64th minute, and that was converted as well. And Leica Clark, not sure if that's how that's pronounced, but it's a weird spelling. It's Laikha. So I'm guessing it's Leica or something like that. In the 68th minute, converted by Lauren Brown in the 69th minute, which made it 50 points to 12. At the end of it all, I will say I think Jamie Chapman, I think did go over for a try that was deemed a no try. Let's scroll back in the 21st, halfway through the 21st minute. So it was deemed no try for that, but 50 points to 12, nothing to scoff at. Really, a lot of big results over the weekend in terms of the NRL women's competition. But obviously for the Titans, that's the biggest one. And ultimately, actually, I think over the weekend it was probably one of the biggest ones in general. Because obviously the Eels haven't been playing too badly. Their first halves have really let them down. But the second halves, they've definitely showed up. And ultimately, it's been one of those things where they've just been a little bit out of balance. But again, a lot of the competition is like that too, to be fair, especially with obviously, as I've mentioned previously, obviously the Roosters and the Broncos being up the top, with all their origin players, all their players that play for Australia and like internationally, international stars, and somehow they don't have a salary cap, I guess, because they could sign so many people from so many different clubs and think that that's balanced. But on the other results, 22 to 18 for the Roosters over the Raiders. In fact, actually, the Roosters were behind in this game. I think they were 18 points to 14, I think it was, very late in that. And then the Roosters ended up scoring 2 quick tries towards the end of the game. 42 to 4 for the Warriors over the Cowboys in Auckland. 24 points to 18 for the Bulldogs over the Sharks. So the Bulldogs get their first win of the year as well on Saturday night. That was a pretty great result. 40 points to 12 for the Broncos over the Tigers. Tigers played relatively okay, but the Broncos again dominating because of course they do. They have so many goddamn stars. And then 38 to 0 for the Knights against the Dragons. So with the result, obviously 50 points to 12, nothing to scoff at when it comes to the Titans. The Titans move into 4th position with that. So Brisbane is still on top. Obviously, they haven't lost yet. Neither has the Sydney Roosters, though, again, like, as I said, it was very, very close. They've been close to losing the last couple of weeks. And they've basically got a jail out of free card both times the last couple of weeks. Newcastle in 3rd position, obviously with that big dominating win, and better for and against than the Titans. The Titans are on plus 40 in terms of points difference now, which is great. A big result as we've had definitely helps with that. Canberra moved down to 5th position with the loss. Warriors jump into 6th. Tigers in 7th. Dragons in 8th. Bulldogs in 9th. Cronulla in 10th, Parramatta in 11th, and North Queensland still on the bottom. And ultimately this week we do play against the Cowboys at Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. So obviously it'll be a home game for the Cowboys, / Cowgirls, Cowboys women's team. And ultimately going back to the preseason, obviously they beat us in preseason. We'll see what happens with that. I think Jamie Chapman, partially did almost go down for an injury in the game on the weekend. So not sure what's happening with that. I think that she's pulled up okay, but again, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think that this team has a good resolve to try and win that game against the Cowboys. The Cowboys women's team's under a lot of pressure right now. Obviously, Queensland Derby as well. Obviously, not the biggest one. Obviously, that's usually Cowboys and Broncos. Usually in the men's competition, it's big brother versus little brother. But ultimately, with the Titans women's team, obviously, I feel like they had a lot to go in the game. They could have put more points on as well. They left a lot of football on the field to play, but we'll see what happens on the weekend. We'll see what happens on Saturday. Hopefully, we can get a win in Townsville and make up for that obviously preseason loss against the Cowboys. We'll see what happens with that, because ultimately they're not playing too terribly, the Cowboys women's team. It's just that they've won against some really good opponents in the first couple of weeks as well, and they've kind of been dominated. Obviously, the Warriors have kind of stepped up a little bit. The Raiders also have. There's a few teams, not even just like the top two. The top two, obviously, in terms of it looks like Brisbane are pretty much dominating again, like they did last season. The Roosters just getting by. It feels like they've taken a step back over the last couple of weeks compared to last season as well. They're still getting wins, but ultimately it feels like they're kind of a string under the Broncos right now, and then everybody else is after that, including Newcastle, obviously, who lost very close to the Roosters a couple of weeks back. But 50 points to 12, nothing to scoff at. Great result for the women. Brings us up to 4th position in the top 4. Great result. And hopefully more to come. Obviously playing against the Cowboys women's team on the weekend on Saturday. But we'll see what happens with that. And hopefully they do relatively well. And as I said, it was a doubleheader in the Gold Coast. So obviously it was the men's team next after that. Probably about an hour after the women finished up. Ended up being a win for the Titans men's team as well. So 2 for 2 in the Gold Coast, 38 points to 32 over the Manly Sea Eagles. And yeah, great result, obviously, from the Titans. A long time coming in terms of a win. Obviously been dudded the last couple of weeks. And obviously, again, we've had a couple of games where we've kind of bottled points, getting competition points. 7 tries to 6 at the end of it all. But in the end, it ended up being at the start. It ended up being the Seagulls up 10 points to 0, with Tom Trbojevic going over in the 1st minute and Jason Saab going over in the 5th minute with the conversion from Jamal Fogarty on the first try. That we did hit back. We did hit back in the 8th minute. Dean Iramia ended up scoring. I think it's one of his first tries since he come back into the NRL. Obviously was a prospect in Melbourne. Did a lot of playing his junior football in Melbourne. Obviously played for the Melbourne Storm. Had quite a few injuries that put him off the NRL list for quite some time. Some long-term injuries as well. But slowly but surely made his way back into the NRL system through the Ipswich Jets, which obviously ended up giving us a situation of picking him up for the Titans, and he ended up scoring, so it was great. Oliver Pascoe, I will say from this try in particular, one of the great tries, I believe it was the first one from Oliver Pascoe, because he did score again in the game. I think that Keanu Kinney or Jaden Campbell gets into a break, and then it gets passed to Tino, and Tino has one of the best plays that he's played all season long, and ultimately one of the best plays he's had for like the last couple of seasons for the Titans. Got a break, put a big right foot on, almost got the try line, and ended up passing back, and Oliver Pascoe's just backing up, getting the pass and scoring. Great try there. then Jason Saab ended up getting a second in the 22nd minute. Around this time, Tom Trbojevic did go off with, I believe it was a calf issue, a calf injury, or a hamstring. I'm not sure which one it was. It was one of his legs, though. He did go off to be assessed and was injured in the game. As I said, Oliver Pascoe ended up scoring in the 27th minute. And most of these were converted. I think that Jamal Fogarty didn't end up converting until the second half in terms of tries, whereas Jaden Campbell missed the conversion on the first one on Dean's. We've got the two on Oliver Pascoe's tries. Jojo Fafita ended up going over in the 33rd minute. Again, another great play here. I think it was one of his tries. I'm not sure which one it was, but he ended up getting into a break as well on the right side of the field. Ended up pushing through, got a pass off to one of the forwards. I think it might have been Aramahau off the top of my head, but I could be wrong on that. Ultimately, falls over in the meantime, but gets back up again and gets, obviously, the forward does a late offload to try and pass the ball. Here comes Jojo Fafita after just falling over and just getting back up again and running onto that, and just runs over and crashes over to score. Fantastic try from him. Ultimately, that's one of the things that I did really appreciate on the weekend, was that a lot of players backed up where they could. And we need to do more of that. In fact, a lot of teams need to do more of that, because I see it so many times during games where I say, someone should have backed him up there, whether it be one or two backing up in a line, because ultimately they could have got a try out of it because there was a gap there somewhere. But it seems to happen all the time. But that was converted as well. And then AJ Brimson ended up scoring in the 39th minute. Did go upstairs because they weren't sure, but it was confirmed to be a try. He did get his hand on the ball and planted it before the dead ball line, and was converted at half time. It was 28-14 in terms of the result. So not ideal from the Titans in only getting 10 points in the second half and giving up quite a few points to the Seagulls in the second half. But again, that is this team when it comes down to the Manly. They might be in and out of it, but they had a lot of errors themselves, and we'll get to how many errors they had in the game very soon. But I will say some of these tries going over were pretty much on the defense as well, because there was some very soft tries. Obviously, the Tom Trbojevic try was a little bit like that. It was a little bit triggery there. The Jason Saab try completely burns. The first try, anyway, completely burns Philip Sami on the wing, just goes down. It's one of those things where, it is what it is, but it's pretty easy. I think the second one was very similar in that as well. And Hamole Olakawatu, that is the correct pronunciation. I had to think about that for a second. He just crashed over through the defense. Obviously short play, so obviously it was going to happen. But saying that, the defense was a little bit flimsy on that. He scored in the 53rd minute. And Bo Firma ended up getting a try himself in the 57th minute, and hopefully it's the first of quite a few tries. He's kind of been in really out of this season in particular, after obviously his pretty decent season last year, especially getting into Origin for the first time. He's really needed something, and hopefully this is the start of something of that. But we'll see what happens with that. Ultimately, Bo just needed something. Hopefully this try is one of those. And that was converted as well. And in fact, actually, that was the last conversion that Jane ended up getting during the game. Ruben Garrick ended up getting a try off quite a bad error from Keanu Kinney in the back. I think he was trying to put his foot out of play, so it was the second tackle, the 7-tackle set. Gets it completely wrong, drops the ball. Though in saying that, it did look like Ruben Garrick was also offside off the kick, which obviously for that rule, the offside would be for if he's in front of the ball. And obviously it went up to the bunker checked it, they said it was right. Tino argued with and discussed it with the referee after the call had been confirmed. It's just one of those things where it feels like, again, it's a bit inconsistent. It brings up during that, and obviously you can search out the speech for it when he's talking to the referee, talks about Max Plath in Origin. I believe Origin 2, if memory serves me right. Max Plath was offside. Actually, it might have been Origin 3, rather, just last week. That Max Plath was offside and called offside off a kick. And it was almost literally one of the similar opportunities there off a kick. So it was a bit of a weird situation with that. Ultimately, they did end up getting the try and got the conversion with that. So it made it very interesting. Jojo Defeater ended up scoring a double in the 69th minute. Ended up being a situation which kind of broke the camel's back in that. Just before that, we had two sin bins from one of each team. Dean Aramia ended up getting hit with a hip drop on on Kola. So obviously when it comes to that, didn't mean it, and obviously great show of sportsmanship from him as well after it happened. Come up to obviously Kola after he got sent off for the sin bin. Obviously hugged him, gave each other. I would say praise, but that's not the right word. But obviously, obviously apologised, and obviously great sportsmanship from him. And then just a minute later, Josh Velladay ended up getting into the sin bin. Obviously, in terms of that, the Titans had a break, and he ends up after a tackle, just as the dummy half's going to pass it, hits at the arm. Very easy sin bin, right in front of the referee. You can't do that. And obviously he got sent for 10 as well. So it ended up being 12 on 12, I believe. So not ideal from him. Kola did end up scoring in the last minute of the game in the 79th minute, and Jamal Fogarty ended up converting it, which made it 38-32 at the end of it all. I think it was like maybe 5-10 seconds left of the game. But it is a great result from the Titans. Ultimately, in terms of the ladder position, it doesn't really change too much because obviously we're still in 16th, obviously 2 points behind, with obviously Parramatta having the bye this week. Though again, it's saying that they don't have any buys anymore, so actually they'll still only just be 2 points in front of us, despite that fact. So ultimately we'll go over the table again. Penrith ended up losing to the Brisbane Broncos on Thursday, so they're still on 32 points right now. And the Warriors have said thank you very much to that, as well as the Sydney Roosters, because the Warriors are in second on 30 with a win. And the Sydney Roosters also got a very close win as well. They're also on 30 points. Cronulla in fourth with 28. And then the Dolphins move up to fifth again after beating the Cowboys in the late game yesterday. Move up to 26 points, with Newcastle dropping a position, obviously with 26 points still in their favour. It's obviously just for and against there. South ended up dropping to 7th position with 24, and then rounding out the top 8 is North Queensland with 24. Manly butchered another situation to get into the top 8 with that loss to the Titans. They're stuck on 22 points in 9th position. Bulldogs ended up winning, so they ended up moving up to 22 points and moving up to 10th position, which dropped Melbourne down to 11th position with 20. Canberra, Raiders in 12th position, also on 20 points. Brisbane move out of the bottom 4 with 18 points, but again, it's for and against. It's kind of helped them in that regard. Obviously, getting the win over Penrith does help with that too. But obviously, with the Tigers, they ended up losing very heavily. So they drop to 14th position with 18 points. Parramatta also on 18 points in 15th. Gold Coast in 16th. In 16th position with 16 points. And obviously, the Dragons on the bottom with 10. Going into this week, we actually do play the Dragons. We play the Dragons on, I believe it's on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday afternoon, very early Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m. game. We play at Jubilee Oval, so we're playing in Cogra, so down towards Sydney Way. Unfortunately, is a situation where I won't be at the game. Again, I'm working that day anyway, so I won't be going to the game regardless. But hopefully we can get 2 wins on the trot. We haven't been able to do that all year, but ultimately 38 points to 32 for the Titans over the Manly Sea Eagles, and a win that is very much needed for this team. We've had quite a few good games in the last month and a bit, and it's good to finally get a win off that. We should have had a win, obviously, last week against Melbourne, but obviously wasn't to be. But we can only do what we can do, and look forward to the rest of the season. See if we can disrupt a lot of games coming up for the Titans. Disrupt a lot of teams heading into finals. We'll see what happens. But yeah, 38 points to 32 ended up being a double in the Gold Coast for the Gold Coast. So yeah, great results there. But yeah, after the start of Sunday, you would think that we would have went 3 for 3 because the Giants would have beaten the Bombers, right? Right? So yeah, they lost. Pretty embarrassingly. 3 points ended up being the margin. 67 to 64. 10 goals 7 to 8 goals and 16 behinds. That's what killed us in the end, was the fact that we were inaccurate in front of goal pretty much the entire game, and it fucking was pitiful. So pissed off with this because the Bombers had a 1 point lead at the quarter time break, 2 goals 4 compared to 2 goals 3. We only kicked 6 behinds. 6 behinds in the second quarter compared to 1 goal 2, which kept, obviously, the Bombers ahead. I think it was by 5 or 6 points in at the half. So it ended up would have been 4 goals compared to 2.5. So yeah, 3 behinds, 3 points in at the half. They ended up scoring 4 goals straight. We scored 3 goals and 4 behinds. 3 goals 3 in the third quarter. So they were still ahead very late, but they got a couple of goals in a row. I think it ended up being 5 goals in a row at one stage there. It did move it back. They ended up scoring 3 goals 1. We scored 3 goals and 4 behinds. At the end of that, make it 8 goals and 16 behinds. And yeah, this is embarrassing. In fact, I feel like they should be embarrassed with the result that they had, because holy fuck, that was an absolute travesty in terms of a game. We'll say Toby Green, start off with that, went off injured. I think it was towards the end of the second quarter, maybe at the start of the third, with a quad injury, and he won't be playing in the Sydney Derby this week. So that adds to that in terms of GWS. But holy fuck, he was the only one that really kicked straight in terms of kicking any points, because he got 2 goals. In fact, actually, he got the first 2 goals for the Giants. The Giants were down. Yes, they did get a couple of goals in that first quarter, but they kicked 3 behinds literally at the start of the game, and ended up actually being a behind fest pretty much for a lot of the game, when obviously they were scoring. Callum Brown got 1 goal 1, Max Grueski got 1 goal 1, Harry Ralston got 1 goal, Jack Orr, don't believe that's how that's pronounced, but anyway, 1 goal. Ryan Angwin, 1 goal. Great goal from him. Could put us in front in the game. Stephen Canelio got 1 goal. Jake Stringer, the big one, 0 goals, 7 behinds. 7 behinds. It was like as if he was giving the game back to his old club in the Bombers. Aaron Cadman ended up getting 0 and 3. They ended up getting 3 behinds. Riley Hamilton was in the game. He got 2 behinds in the game, but again, that's not completely on him. And Xavier Halloran also got a behind as well. But our set shot kicking, and ultimately it was bad from both teams as well, let's be real. But holy Jesus, Any one of those kicks that go through, especially off of 7 kicks from Jake Stringer, any one of those goes through for a goal, we win the game. Like, literally, Essendon's pressure was very much up, which I like. Ultimately, I got to give credit where credit is due to the Bombers. They played a really great game. Obviously, in terms of defense, it was basically 1-on-1 pretty much the whole way. But yeah, we were very average at best. In terms of the free kicks, it was 27-15 in terms of Essendon. We did give away some cheap ones as well, but at one stage, very early, I think it was like 10 or 15 minutes into the first quarter, I think they were up 11 free kicks to 2 or 11 free kicks to 1 at one stage there, which was crazy. Definitely felt like it was a game in Melbourne. But I don't know what it is. We can't play under the lid, apparently. We can't play. We're in front for 34 minutes, 43 seconds in this game. But, yeah, very average from the Giants. One of those things where we play against two really good sides in Fremantle and the Cats, and then we just put up an absolute fucking shit show against the Bombers. And ultimately, if we miss out on finals, we look back at games like this and say this is the reason why, because they've been inconsistent this year. And it's come down to a lot of those things because when it comes to the Giants in particular, I don't know what is happening with this team. I swear I don't even know when it comes down to it because they've lost against Essendon. They narrowly lost by 14 points to Hawthorn in the second game, but they shouldn't even got any close to that. Carlton, they lost to. They've lost to St Kilda twice in the same year. They only just won in the first game against them at NG Stadium. They won by 14 points. They got absolutely minced meat by the Eagles in their game in the West by 17 points at the end of it, but especially in the first quarter. They lost by 20 to the Gold Coast Suns when they were still playing relatively right. Close result, obviously won by 7 against North Melbourne, but North Melbourne were in that game pretty much the entire way. Richmond, obviously they pulled ahead very late. The Giants in the second half, obviously 56-point win, but Richmond were right there. They were in front a couple of times during the game. Obviously playing under the lid against Collingwood, lost by 33 there, lost by 4 points at home against the Saints, like I mentioned earlier. 81-point loss, obviously, to the Western Bulldogs as well in round 2. That also doesn't help that in that regard. But that game, the Collingwood game, scroll down, the Saints game, and obviously this game, all under the lid at Marvel Stadium. There's no lid, so there's barely any wind, if any at all, in there, and they still can't fucking kick straight. Like, so pissed off. I'm so pissed off. Because I know that they can kick better. And ultimately, it puts a lot of pressure on this team now to really perform in the last few weeks to get into that wildcard spot. Because they didn't get in there. They're still in 11th position with that loss. Because obviously, the Saints ended up losing, yes. But they're on the same amount of points as the Giants, as is Carlton, and as is North Melbourne. All those 4 teams are on the same amount of points right now in terms of wildcard spot. And realistically, when we're going to be playing, if we're going to be playing into that wildcard spot, we're going to be playing on the bottom 2 of those positions, 9 and 10, if we make the finals at all. And most likely, when it comes to that, the 2 teams that are in there right now, obviously Collingwood's in there as well in 8th position, but we've got Geelong. Obviously, they could play at GMHBA, but they could also play at the Cattery, but also at the MCG, because obviously usually, and I would assume during the final series for this year as well, with the wildcards, they're going to have a game at the MCG every single week during the finals, including obviously the grand final. I think that's a contracted obligation that they need to do every year. So obviously, if there's a Melbourne team, which a lot of the teams obviously in the competition are Melbourne teams, a lot of them will be playing at the MCG. If we play against the Bulldogs, who are in 7th right now, they play at Marvel. So realistically, turning this whole thing around when it comes to playing at Marvel Stadium, we can't play there apparently right now. I think thankfully we don't play there again. But yeah, we need to turn up in the next 5 weeks. We need to win pretty much the majority of these games. I think literally we need at least 3. I think we need 4, at least 4 of the 5 games, if not all 5, to even push for a final spot. Because again, as I said a couple of weeks ago, it's a Sydney derby this week, and we played like we did last night. To the Bombers, if we play against Sydney in that regard, obviously even without Toby Green at this point now as well, we're going to get absolutely slaughtered. Like, yes, obviously the Sydney Swans are on the slide. They've lost a couple of games in a row. Obviously, losing to Brisbane very recently. They obviously lost to the Dockers last week, and they lost to the Adelaide Crows this week as well. The week just gone. They're under a lot of pressure themselves to keep into the top 2 positions because Hawthorn are right behind them now. They're behind by 2 points, obviously, with that draw against Collingwood. But realistically, Swans, they could absolutely rinse us, and they did in the first Sydney derby. If I scroll back to that game at the SCG, we lost by 41 points at the end of it. But we weren't really in the game at all. During that first game. We just got absolutely slaughtered in the second half. And we're going to need a titanic performance, a giant performance, to go with, obviously, a pun, to play well against the Swans. Because we got Port Adelaide in at the Adelaide Oval after that, which, who knows, with Port Adelaide, they seem to turn up even with troops, because they played relatively well against the Fremantle Dockers, and the Freo ended up getting the win over the weekend, which obviously pushed them even further ahead on the table. But for a lot of that game, they were behind at the Adelaide Oval against Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide have been down on troops pretty much all year long, and in fact actually last week they were down on more troops. So who knows when it comes against them. Then obviously it's the Expansion Cup, obviously with the Suns in Canberra. So who knows with that. Obviously the Suns are on the slide, but they need a win. They're going to be desperate for a win in the next couple of weeks. And obviously that Giants game, they're going to be circling that. If they don't circle, obviously, this week's game or next week's game, like this week coming or the next week, they'll be circling that Giants game and being like, this is a game that we could possibly win. And obviously sink the Giants' season pretty much the entire way. And then we got West Coast at home at NG before obviously going back to the Adelaide Oval to play against the Crows. And the Crows are obviously in 5th position. They're fighting for a top 4 spot. At this point in time, when we play them in that, unless they have a slide, they're going to be fighting for a top 4 spot. So they're going to be right up for the game entirely if they're not in a top 4 spot at that point in time because of how close it is at the top. So relatively, when it comes to a lot of these games, I think that if we don't win against Sydney, I think you can almost put a line against the Giants and scratch them out from even a wildcard spot at this point, because we can't be losing to Essendon. You can't be losing to last. In fact, they're not last anymore with this result as well, which kind of pisses me off more, just as much, if not more so, because obviously my friend is a Tiger supporter, and they've dropped to the bottom. So ultimately with the table, Fremantle on top, 64 points. Sydney Swans with 52. 50 points. Hawthorn in 3rd position. Brisbane Lions in 4th with 48. Then the Adelaide Crows also on 48. It's just 0.6% between those two clubs. So it's very, very close to a top 4 spot there. And then Melbourne with a win as well. They're on 48 points in 6th position. 7th position is Brisbane. Western Bulldogs, rather, 44 points. Then Collingwood with 42 in 8th position. Geelong obviously getting a win over St Kilda. Stay on 40 points in 9th position. And, sorry, I should say stay in 9th position, but move up to 40 points. Again, sickness is running through me, I'm sorry. And then St Kilda stay in 10th position, obviously, with the Giants losing. And also Carlton and North Melbourne also losing in those regards as well. St Kilda just hanging on by percentage points into that top 10 position. Giants in 11th, Carlton in 12th, North Melbourne in 13th, all on 32 points. Then Gold Coast Suns on 14th with 28, Port Adelaide with 24 in 15th position. West Coast Eagles with 16 points in 16th. Essendon jump off the bottom, as I said, with 8 points. It's just their percentage is a lot better than Richmond right now. And obviously Richmond dropped to the bottom with their percentage also on 8 points. In fact, it's 67.9 to 61.7. It's only because Richmond have not been actually scoring a lot of points in the last few games. And obviously Essendon, when it comes to some of their losses this year, they've actually scored quite a few, especially obviously against the Giants earlier this year. In saying that, they scored 89 points. We ended up scoring 103, but they scored 89 points, obviously, in that game as well. So they obviously that would have been a negative in terms of their percentage, but obviously would have been a decent amount because obviously it goes on points scored and then obviously comparing it to total points, obviously, in the game, I think is how they work out the percentage. So ultimately, more wins and higher wins, obviously, bigger wins, obviously, will give you more percentage, and obviously low wins will give you a slight boost, and obviously big heavy defeats will also hurt your percentage as well. But again, Sydney Derby this week, Saturday, looking forward to going to this game. Ultimately, yes, I'm sick, but I should be right for Saturday, I think. Ultimately, it was like this last year. I was sick in the 2025 season before, obviously, the NG game for the Sydney Derby, the NG Sydney Derby. Which obviously was the episode where I had my voice lost, pretty much. But I'm looking forward to the game. I'm hoping that ultimately for us it's going to be a win, but it's going to be a lot of pressure on us right now because we need to perform, and it's something that we really need to look at. And we have not been great the last few weeks. We definitely need to improve. In saying that, obviously 8 wins, 10 losses on the season. 13 wins, 5 losses for the Sydney Swans. Not ideal when it comes to that. It's just been pretty average at best when it comes down to the Giants. In the last, this season in general has been pretty average at best. I know we've obviously had injuries, but that's no real excuse because, again, yes, Richmond and Essendon are at the bottom, but they've gotten injuries themselves. Realistically, the only really big team that hasn't had too many injury issues is Fremantle. And obviously they're on the top of the table, but they've had pretty much their entire squad pretty much all year. And it definitely shows. Sydney's obviously got some missing. Hawthorn's obviously got missing people all the time. The Cats is another big one as well, which has contributed to their slide down from a top 6 position into that wildcard spot. But yeah, a lot of things are going against the Giants season, and it just feels like we're cursed pretty much. If it isn't the injuries, it's stupid losses like this. 3-point loss to the Bombers, who are not on the bottom of the ladder anymore, and I am so pissed because pretty much had a full 24 hours, pretty much. That was all positive, including obviously the Cubs, which eventually we'll get to in this video. Had so many positives, and then this happens. So, again, almost another perfect week, but a giant missed opportunity for the Giants to move into that wildcard spot and hold it themselves. It's a win that's gone begging and just puts more pressure on this team to perform in the last weeks of the season to make a push for the finals. It's just not good enough. 8 goals, 16 is not good enough at all. That's pretty pitiful. Pretty pitiful performance over the weekend from the Giants against the Bombers. Alright, now we'll start some miscellaneous stuff. We're going to start with the World Cup, but before we do that, I will say Dominic Zoboslai, I believe that's how it's pronounced. I never know with the fact of his spelling of his last name. Signed a extension to stay at a long-term contract at Liverpool, first and foremost. And speaking of football, so that's obviously a big movement from the club. Obviously, he's signed a long-term contract. It doesn't say necessarily how long it is, I don't think. But it's good to get some stability there from him. Obviously, he's been relatively good for Liverpool in the lead up to that. Obviously, we got the lead up to obviously pre-season coming up very, very soon. Wrexham, I will say, in speaking on pre-season, just beat Man United 1-0 in their pre-season games, so they're on a high a little bit. We don't play until Sunday the 26th, so it's not. I don't believe it's this week. No, it is this weekend. Starting, we play against Sunderland, obviously in the US, for that pre-season friendlies. Sunderland at GNS Park in Nashville, Tennessee, and then obviously playing against Wrexham at Yankee Stadium in the second week, which is the Thursday, the 30th, and then obviously at Soldier Field against Leeds United in Chicago, Illinois, and then playing at Anfield for both the other friendlies against Monaco and Como. So we've got some friendly matches coming up, obviously late in this month and early next month, before obviously the season starts on the 24th of August for us in terms of the Premier League. So obviously he's there. In terms of the World Cup, we'll go over the results for that, but we'll say with Liverpool, in terms of it was obviously Alexis McAllister and Victor Munoz against each other. Obviously Spain against Argentina in the final. And with that, Spain ended up coming out on top and are champions of the world. 1-0 ended up being the result in the final. Obviously they ended up winning in extra time in the 106th minute. Ferran Torres ended up scoring in the 106th minute. Enzo Fernandez ended up getting a red card from his second yellow in the 3rd minute stoppage time, very late in regulation time. So Argentina were down a man in the late end of regular time, in the stoppage time, and then obviously in extra time as well. But we'll say, obviously, with the results in terms of the semi-finals, obviously we talk about the final with them in particular. Go into the fixtures here. But it ended up being very crazy in terms of the semi-finals. Obviously, France versus Spain. I thought one of these two teams was probably going to win it in terms of that. And obviously, as I said, they faced each other. And it was 2-0 to Spain. And they did well, obviously, in terms of defence. They only let in one goal pretty much all campaign long. And that was against Belgium. Belgium, obviously, playing against Spain. And they ended up getting into a situation of scoring the other goal against Spain. So that's a record in terms of a champion of the World Cup in terms of conceding goals. They're actually on the list twice. So the fact that they've won 2 World Cups and have done really well in terms of defense. I think the second one, obviously in 2010, obviously was when they first won the World Cup. I think they only conceded 2 goals all tournament long, so that's pretty crazy from them. 2-1, obviously, for Argentina over England, which put England and France in the bronze final, obviously for the bronze medal, 3rd place in terms of the world rankings. And that was a crazy game in of itself because it was 6-4 to England. So England ended up getting 3rd position. Obviously, France in 4th in terms of the world rankings. Obviously, it'll be Spain, Argentina, England, and then France. I would imagine that's probably how the table would set up. But England were up 4-0 at halftime, I believe, in that game. So they pretty much, France almost got it all the way back. I think it was 4-3, I think it ended up being. In terms of that, Declan Rice ended up scoring in the 3rd minute. Konza scored in the 18th minute. Bukayo Saka ended up scoring his first goal in the 37th minute, and then his brace in the 1st minute stoppage time, which made it obviously 4-0 at half time. Then Mbappe ended up scoring in the 48th minute. Barcola in the 54th minute. Mbappe again in the 66th minute. So it ended up being 4-3 for a decent amount of time. Bukayo Saka ended up scoring a penalty, which could have went to Jude Bellingham, as well, to be fair. He did go on a couple of minutes before that. Obviously, there's been some opportunities as well from both sides, including, obviously, especially from England in that second half. Especially when he just come on. I think it was literally a couple of minutes after he went on, maybe like 90 seconds at most. They almost got involved with a goal. He could have stepped up and taken the free kick, but obviously he thought that Bukayo Saka ended up was a better opportunity, and obviously it paid off because obviously he ended up scoring the one that broke the momentum in the 87th minute. Then Dembele ended up scoring again scored in the 6-minute stoppage time, which made it obviously 5-4. And then obviously in the 8th minute stoppage time, Jude Bellingham ended up getting a break, obviously from a defense. Ended up obviously all attack for France, obviously to win the game, to try and tie it, obviously to go to extra time, and it goes all the way up the other end. Jude Bellingham ended up getting an intercept, going all the way down the other end, ended up shooting in the back of the net. 6-4 ended up being the result there, and obviously 1-0 in the final this morning. So Spain are on top of the world again, first time since 2010, obviously, that they've lifted the trophy, and Messi goes out in second position with Argentina, and probably goes out of his international career in terms of playing in the World Cup, because I don't think he'll be going again. I know Ronaldo obviously won't be going again. I think Neymar Jr. I think is out as well. I think he's almost pretty much done in terms of that level of competition in that, and I feel like Messi in terms of that is out as well. I think this is his last World Cup. So great to go back-to-back finals, and obviously winning the first one, getting relatively close in the second one as well. It was 0-0 for a lot of that game. But they were just under pressure, under siege from Spain pretty much the entire time. They didn't get a shot on target at all during the game, Argentina. So Spain were right up for it. But great on Victor Munoz, obviously, to get the win. It's pretty hard done for Alexis McAllister, obviously of Liverpool fame, playing for Argentina. In the loss there, but again shows how good football can be, and there's quite a lot of good sides. I think that Spain will deserve the win. They played relatively well and were dominant. They should have probably been up a couple of goals, to be fair, but again, is the sign of a good final, obviously keeping it in the balance, and obviously nerves are going to be all aplenty. A couple of easy shots that could have went into the net. Goalkeepers from both ends, especially obviously for the Argentinian and Eri Martinez, did great in terms of being in the back of the net for Argentina, because he's kept out quite a few shots from Spain and a couple of crucial saves which kept them in the game up until obviously the goal decently into stoppage time, into extra time, and obviously was just in the first minute of the second half of extra time. So not a lot of time for Argentina to move forward and try and attack, but they did do relatively well in trying to do that. It's just obviously left it very, very late in the game when they probably should have possibly attacked more. I think that ultimately if they attacked more, maybe they would have put pressure under Spain, but Spain's defense in terms of and holding the ball in terms of possession was second to none. Their control was much better in the game entirely. There wasn't too many mistakes from them, to be fair, and I think that they come out deserved winners. So for the second time, obviously, in World Cup history, Spain are on top of the world. And look at me go, this is the last bit of the miscellaneous segment, and we're recording all this video on the same day. Look at me go, especially when I'm feeling sick. Did well, but obviously we're going to talk about the Cubs, obviously off the All-Star break, and we'll get to the All-Star game eventually in a second. But obviously, game series at home against the Twins, the Minnesota Twins, ended up being a 2-1 series win, although we did lose the first game. Pretty average performance, actually, in the first game. It was 5-2 for the Cubs. 6 hits, 2 runs, not good enough. Especially considering that we led in the first. The bottom of the first, Michael Bush ended up hitting a single, which scored PCA, and we had Seiya Suzuki on third base. I think we only had one out, I think, at that point. No, we didn't have any outs at all. So we had someone on third base, and we had someone on first base. We didn't score any more in the first. Pretty average performance there. Then top of the third, they ended up scoring a single, then a 3-run home run come off Colin Rea, and ultimately his pitching was pretty average at best. 3-run home run, which made it 4-1 Cubs at the top of the third. There was a wild pitch in the bottom of the sixth from a different pitcher, and scored. Seiya Suzuki ended up running in, made it 4-2. So it gave us a little faint hope. And then in the top of the seventh, so literally not even half an inning after, Minnesota put in a single after loading up the bases again. Gave them a score, very easy score. Just something that we can't do. Thankfully, at least with that, we won the last two games. Obviously won 6-2 in the second game. Much better. 11 hits, 6 runs, compared to 8 hits and 2 runs for Minnesota. So much better in terms of scoring. In terms of the scoring, Michael Bush ended up hitting a home run in the bottom of the first. Went straight to, obviously this was the celebration. Obviously the first game was a celebration of the All-Star game being officially unveiled at Wrigley Field, and obviously the logo for that as well. So I don't know if that was on people's minds, and especially after the All-Star break, obviously having a hangover from that, I don't know. But obviously for the second game, it obviously was the opening for Champions Gate, which obviously is the tribute to the 2016 World Series winning Cubs. So obviously their 2016 team was in the house, and it went straight to Anthony Rizzo. Obviously one of the players from that 2016 team was in the bleachers, and that home run went basically straight to him. He didn't catch it, but obviously he was there with his family. He's holding up his son, and obviously the baseball as well, but it went to him in the bleachers. So great in terms of that. Top of the second, Cody Clemens ended up hitting a homer, which made it 1-1 for the Twins. Bottom of the second, Miguel Amaya ended up hitting a double, which scored 2. Scored Nico and Dansby in to make it 3-1 to Cubs. So Miguel Amaya again getting RBI, getting a hit. Bottom of the third, Nico Horner ended up hitting a single, which scored Seiya Suzuki in. Then Pedro Ramirez hit a ground rule double on a fly ball, left field line, which scored Ian Happ. Moved Nico to third base at that point in time, which made it 5-1 Cubs. Obviously, we didn't end up getting any more runs in that. Top of the seventh, Cody Clemens again comes in with another homer, make it 5-2. And then right in immediately in the bottom of the seventh, Pedro Ramirez comes in again and scores a single, which scores Michael Bush and Nico Horner to third base, which makes it 6-2 Cubs in the second game. So much better result from that. And then leading into this game, we actually did get another trade for another player. We got a right-handed pitcher in Aaron Cavale from the Athletics. So for minor league right-hand pitcher Aidan Moffat. So obviously, I think we actually played against Cavale not that long ago. Obviously, when we played the A's. And we got actually some cash with that as well in terms of that trade as well, which is great. But we'll see what happens with that. I'm not sure if he's going to be starting pitching or not, but in terms of, he ended up obviously not doing too bad, I believe, from memory, in that series against the Cubs. Obviously, the Cubs ended up losing to the Athletics, I believe, in that series, but obviously we did get a win back in that game, in that series in particular, which is great. But then obviously off the back of that, this morning we ended up getting a 10-1 win in the last game of the series, 10 runs to 1. Bottom of the first, Alex Bregman come in, hits a 2-run home run on the bottom of the first. So it ended up being 2-0 Cubs in the bottom of the first. Bottom of the second, Carson Kelly ended up scoring a single, which scored Pedro Ramirez in for 3-0. Then bottom of the third, Nico Horner ends up hitting a triple, which is a big issue because it actually clears the bases. So Alex Bregman scored, Michael Bush scored, Ian Happ scored, and ultimately this was a triple that was hit by the center fielder. For whatever reason, he let it kind of go a little bit further to didn't have his glove down, obviously, far enough, and obviously went straight to the ivy, so it ended up scoring 3, which made it 6-0 Cubs. Then Pedro Ramirez comes in and scores Nico to make it 7-0 in the bottom of the third inning. And then Michael Bush ended up hitting a single in the bottom of the fourth to score PCA. Then Alex Bregman reached the base on fielder's choice, which scored Seiya Suzuki. And obviously off a fielding error, Michael Bush ended up getting the second, and Alex Bregman got the first. So made it 9-0 Cubs. Then Nico Horner comes in and scores Michael Bush to make it 10-0 in the bottom of the fourth inning. So let's keep in mind that's 10 runs in 4 innings for the Cubs there. Crazy. I don't know why we can't consistently do that all the time, like at least score some. But it was great. And then Royce Lewis ended up getting a little sacrifice fly, which ended up being the one score that they got. Obviously second out, but did score one of their players in, which made it 10-1. So obviously couldn't get a shutout, but 8 hits for them in terms of the Twins for 1 run compared to 12 hits for 10 runs for the Cubs there, which is great. And especially from Shota was pitching in this. Scoreless innings pretty much the entire way. It was obviously one of our relieving pitchers. I think it was Phil Matten again, which gave up the 1 run. But I think Shota did show up really, really well in this game. Definitely had obviously worked on something over the break. Hopefully this is the first of many of great results from him, because he pitched 7 innings, got 4 strikeouts, which is not a lot, but ultimately didn't get any runs scored against him and got a few hits on him, but ultimately Shota showed up, and that was great. Obviously Bregman did really good, obviously, with that home run as well. Nico, obviously, firing up a little bit as well. So, in terms of great for this team in particular, and another series win, obviously, for them. Obviously, can't get any sweeps, which is a bit unfortunate. But with the All-Star game, it was pretty lackluster if you're a National League fan, because it ended up being 4-0 to the American League over them in the All-Star game, with Cody Bellinger scoring a single, which scored one of their runs, 2 runs rather, in that single, to make it 2-0 in the top of the first, and then another single made it 3-0, and then in the bottom of the 8th, Miguel Vargas from Chicago White Sox fame hit a homer on a fly ball to left field, which made it 4-0. PCA did end up getting a couple of I think at least a base hit in that game in particular. I think it was possibly a double from memory, and actually did pretty well in that game. The home run derby, I think, was won by one of the Cardinals players, obviously over Kyle Schwarber, Jordan Walker, sorry. Yeah, over Kyle Schwarber. So obviously that's probably one of the only things that the Cardinals are going to win all year. But obviously big series coming after obviously the Minnesota Twins, Detroit Tigers. I know obviously where they're sitting in terms of the wild card race and that sort of thing, in terms of their division and in terms of their league. They're not playing well. But obviously the break in between that on the Friday for me, and then it goes into Pittsburgh, into a hell of a lot of games, including the biggest block. Obviously Pittsburgh, St. Louis, both away from home, New York at home, Dodgers at home, obviously that make-up game for the Blue Jays, and then obviously Kansas City in Kansas City, so before our next break, which will be on the 11th of August. So makes it very tough, but obviously this stretch, if we can get a lot of wins from those series in terms of playing against Pittsburgh, who obviously Pittsburgh ended up sweeping the Brewers just before the All-Star break. So they're in a good state of mind, and then obviously they're ahead in the season series against us, obviously only being up by one game. But St. Louis obviously in front of us as well, playing in St. Louis. It's just going to be really tough. It's going to be a really tough stretch, obviously with them, and obviously the Dodgers playing well, and then obviously the Yankees. It's the Yankees. So with that, obviously, with obviously the loss, and obviously Milwaukee ended up getting a sweep against the Florida Marlins. They're still in front by 6 games. They did actually gain a game with that loss in the first game against the Twins for Chicago. So 6 games behind in the division, then 10.5 for St. Louis, which is the same amount for the Pittsburgh Pirates as well. And then 16.5 behind is the Cincinnati Reds in the division. Now, in terms of the wild card spots, we're 4.5 games in now in the wild card position. Obviously, the Dodgers on top, 63 and 36. Doesn't look like that's going to be changing too much. Milwaukee, obviously 62 and 37, and Atlanta 57 and 41. So obviously, bit of a difference between those two teams. 56 and 43, obviously for the Cubs, so not too bad. Then Philadelphia Phillies, 3 games in, they're 55 and 45, and then St. Louis move in to that 6th position with obviously the Marlins losing, and they've lost 6 straight now, 6 in a row, so not ideal for them. They've dropped out into that 7th position in their wild card race. Obviously St. Louis jumping in, which is not great for them in particular. Then Pittsburgh's not far behind them. They're on the same amount of games as all 3 of those teams. Diamondbacks are behind by half a game. Washington's behind by 2 games. San Diego Padres behind by 2.5. Then it goes to 6 for the Cincinnati Reds. 9.5 for the Giants, in terms of San Francisco Giants. Mets behind by 10 games, and 12.5 for the Rockies. American League, Tampa Bay still on top, 56 and 42. Chicago White Sox, 52 and 46 in 2nd position, and 3rd position is still the Texas Rangers on 50 and 49. Then obviously the Yankees, they've moved back a little bit. They're only 4 games ahead in their wildcard race now, 54 and 44, and the Cleveland Guardians in 5th with 1 game into the wildcard spots. 52 and 48, and then the Boston Red Sox with a 13 win streak, coming out of nowhere into that 6th position in the wildcard race. So they've absolutely come in flying, 50 and 48 right now, including obviously a sweep against the Yankees, a 4-game sweep in that. But 13 in a row for them, probably one of the big, I think actually is the biggest streak all year from any of the clubs right now. But there's quite a few clubs in and around that mix there as well in the American League. Obviously, Seattle Mariners, they're out by they're out by a game in that wildcard spot now. Baltimore Orioles have won 7 in a row, so they're up to 2 games out as well. Minnesota Twins, obviously, with those 2 losses, they're still 2 games out of the wildcard spots. Houston Astros, they got swept. So they're behind by 4.5 games, as is the Blue Jays and the Detroit Tigers. So the Detroit Tigers are relatively close, 46 and 53 when we go against them tomorrow. So that's going to be crazy in terms of recording this. Anyway, 8.5 games for the Athletics. They're still continuing to slide, though they did get a win, obviously, in those games, in that current series that they're playing, but obviously lost today. Then obviously the Royals, 11 games out, and 12 games out for the Angels. But and so actually the Angels have actually jumped from the bottom, with the Rockies being half a game behind them. But yeah, Detroit obviously looking to possibly get a sweep if we can at home. Hopefully we can. Before that little break on the Friday, before we get into that big block of games, obviously 3 against Pittsburgh, 4 against St. Louis, 3 against the Yankees, 3 against the Dodgers. Obviously that 1 game against Toronto, though, that would have been a break if we didn't have to move that game. and then obviously the Royals at the end of it all, before that day break on the 11th of August. It's going to be huge block after that day break. But hopefully we can get some good momentum in that Tiger series, and then obviously go into the rest of those games. Looking forward to it. But 2-1 series win over the Twins. Cubs had to do what they had to do. They did get the win. Obviously, it should have been a series sweep, to be fair. But again, can't do much about it. Guess they had a little bit of a hangover from obviously a few days break. But what else is new from this Cubs team? They just show up sometimes and they don't show up other times, and I don't get it. But looking good. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. Again, I apologise if I sound all nasally. Obviously have been sick pretty much the entire time. Pretty crazy that I've actually recorded all this video once on the same day, though, in saying that every time I have filmed a segment, I've gone to blow my nose because I've got, which has not been ideal, but I will be doing that in a second as well, because I can feel it kind of dripping. But yeah, hopefully it should be good to watch the Sydney Derby, and should be all fresh to go. We'll see what happens with that. Obviously taking today off in terms of work, so I won't be going to work today, so obviously don't work until Thursday now. So hopefully, because obviously my 2 days, my Tuesday and my Wednesday, my normal days off this week, so hopefully that 3-day break can give me enough time to rest up and get some more fluids in me, like water and stuff like that, and hopefully can get me better by the time Thursday or even Friday rolls around. Hopefully I can feel much better before obviously that Saturday game, which obviously would be a weekend I'm normally working, but obviously taking the day off to watch the Sydney Derby, and then we'll be back at work on Sunday as per normal. So yeah, we'll see what happens over the week. It's going to be crazy, lots to do. Lots to go forward. Obviously, Titans women's team against the Cowboys. Giants at home, obviously, in that derby. Obviously, the Cubs have got the Tigers before, obviously, going against Pittsburgh later in that week. The Titans men's team, trying to think now, they're playing, I think, the Dragons, should know that, at Jubilee Oval. So, yeah, big week for a lot of the teams coming up, especially the Giants. That's a big one. And obviously for the Cubs, it's pretty much a second for that. But hopefully we've got some momentum going in for all my teams to get into a situation of playing better. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Mendez 100. You guys are a great night, and of course, take care. Hey guys, sorry, a little addendum to the end of this episode. Sorry, I just had a shower, so my hair's all wet, so that's why I look a little bit different. Obviously wearing normal skivvies and stuff like that. Obviously my comfy clothes, track pants, long sleeve shirt, just to kind of make myself comfortable. But obviously not in terms of the Giants, but in terms of the importance in the AFL. The Tasmanian Devils obviously will be added to the competition in a couple of years' time. They just announced their head coach this morning. As I was recording this a couple of hours ago, they announced their coach, who is Ken Hinkley. Obviously Ken Hinkley, previously been the coach for a number of years at Port Adelaide, Port Adelaide Power. Obviously stepped away at the end of last season after their horror season last year. He's taken a year off and obviously going to further development of the inaugural season for the Tasman Devils, where they're added in, I believe it's 2028. So still got a little while left, but obviously they're trying to get that out as a decision out there. Obviously the draft is pretty soon, mid-season draft. It's coming up. Obviously the draft picks will be coming up soon, and obviously Tasmania will be included in that in the next couple of cycles in terms of the trade period. So ultimately, having the coach there now will incentivize more people that are, on the fringe of joining the club for their inaugural side. I think we'll be in a situation where it feels a little bit more stability. with Ken Hinkley now at the helm, and great pick in terms of coach. Obviously, it was obviously down to him. John Longmire and Nathan Buckley were the three that were mentioned. I feel like with Ken, you know what you're going to expect when it comes to Ken Hinkley. Like, obviously, he'll give that grunt and that edge for Tasmania, and I think they're setting themselves in the right direction. Obviously, their VFL side is doing relatively well. The crowds there for that club in particular, I think it's like around the average of like 15,000 in their VFL games. And let's keep in mind, VFL is like the second tier of the AFL leagues. So they're getting like 15,000 when some of the teams are barely getting over 1,000 or 2,000 at some of those games. Obviously, the Giants sometimes will have their VFL games before at NG Stadium before the AFL plays. They did, obviously, when I went down there to watch the Carlton Blues game. They had the VFL side against Carlton on that day in particular. So, but their VFL side, I think, is running in 8th right now. I think they've come off a couple of losses in a row. I think 2 losses out of the last 3, I think, if memory serves. But they're in 8th position. They're in the top 10. Giants, I think, are like 5th or 6th, I think, from memory. So, coming off a decent loss last week. After having obviously the week off the week before. But Ken Hinkley as a coach, I think that's going to be great for them in the lead up to when they get out into the competition. Obviously, there's a lot of other things to go on with that. The stadium, obviously, down in Tasmania, and obviously the side as well. But obviously, a lot of the VFL players, I would imagine, would be part of that inaugural side when it comes into the AFL. I feel like that's probably a certainty at that point. Obviously, they're going to have some big signings, very much like akin to maybe Gold Coast. I don't know whether they'll go that hard on that, because ultimately they're at a level where they want this expansion side to be successful, especially in Tasmania. But I don't feel like the way that the Suns did their business was good enough. With the fact that obviously their first finals campaign was last year, after 15 seasons, and obviously getting a win in that final series, yes, but in saying that, taking that long as an expansion side to get into the finals and be competitive in any form or fashion, it's not ideal. Obviously, it's been after a couple of seasons where they've been in and around the mix as well, but obviously with the Giants, obviously a bit more successful, a bit sooner, but obviously it took like year 4, year 5 by the time the Giants were kind of competitive in and around that final series race. They kind of want to fast track that a little bit, but I think Ken Hinkley as a coach, I think it's a good decision. I think he's going to, like I said, bring some grunt, bring some energy into that squad when it eventually eventuates. But I feel like that club's going to be better off with him as at the helm as the inaugural coach. And it's tongue in cheek. I think it's like a last ditch FU to Hawthorn and Jack Ginnivan. Obviously, with the fact that Hawthorn have played a lot of their games down in Tasmania in the last, I don't know how long, like well over a decade, I think, at this point now. So when Tassie eventually gets added in, obviously Hawthorn's contract with that, I believe, will be up. Maybe it might be a situation where Tasmania and Hawthorn will play in Tasmania to kind of fulfill that role a little bit. But we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, after obviously the aeroplane fiasco with him, with Ginnivan and Ken Hinkley as well, and obviously with the Port Adelaide Power and the Hawthorn Hawks, it's kind of like another jab back at Hawthorn. But good signing from a coach. Obviously the first coach for the Tasmanian Devils in the AFL when they get added in a couple of years' time. So yeah, just wanted to bring that to your attention because obviously that broke as I was recording this episode, and obviously it's a big deal. Not necessarily for the Giants, but for the AFL in general. So thought I'd bring that to attention at the end of this video. Obviously, it won't be, I don't think will be as long as some of the episodes that we've had recently. Obviously, me being sick is primary factor to that, but I could have rambled on for a long time. I don't know. I haven't edited the video yet, so we'll see. But before it gets any longer, just wanted to bring that to your attention. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. And yeah, I'll see you next time, next episode, or any of the videos that I post when it comes to my Let's Play stuff and some of the Monday uploads and all that jazz. So thanks again.